Jake Mitchell slumped in the uncomfortable plastic chair, staring at the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The waiting room of the Galactic District Court smelled like disinfectant and recycled air. He'd been sitting here for 2 hours already, filling out form after form. His hand cramped as he signed another document about his relationship with Rachel. 3 months ago, his ex-girlfriend had dropped a bombshell. She claimed he was the father of her child and demanded child support. Jake knew it wasn't true. They'd only dated for 6 weeks, and the timeline didn't match up at all. But Rachel was persistent, and now the court system was involved. He had to prove he wasn't the father, which meant submitting to a DNA test. The door finally opened, and a nurse called his name. Jake grabbed his jacket and followed her down a long hallway lined with offices. Through the windows, he could see the stars beyond the station's hull. Station Kepler 442 orbited a trade world, and ships came and went constantly. The station housed over 50 different alien species, all living and working together. It was normal life in the galaxy, messy, bureaucratic, and sometimes frustrating. The nurse led him into a small examination room. "The geneticist will be with you shortly," she said in a bored voice before leaving. Jake sat on the exam table, swinging his legs. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through messages. His buddy Tyler had sent him a joke about the situation. His sister Kelly wanted to know how it was going. He typed back quick responses, trying not to think about how much this whole mess was costing him in legal fees. The door slid open, and an alien walked in. Dr. Vorin was a Thrain, with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his blue-skinned face. He wore a white lab coat and carried a tablet. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, his translator device rendering his speech into English. "This should only take a moment." "Yeah, let's get it over with," Jake muttered. Dr. Vorin pulled out a small device that looked like a pen. "Just a cheek swab. Open your mouth, please." Jake complied, and the doctor scraped the inside of his cheek. The sample went into a vial, which Vorin inserted into a sleek silver machine on the counter. The machine hummed to life, lights blinking in sequence. "The scanner will analyze your genetic markers and compare them to the child's profile," Dr. Vorin explained, typing something on his tablet. "It usually takes about 5 minutes." Jake nodded, checking his phone again. He had a shift at the spaceport in 3 hours. He worked as a mechanic, fixing cargo haulers and transport ships. The pay wasn't great, but it kept food on the table and paid rent on his tiny apartment in the lower levels of the station. Dr. Vorin wandered to the other side of the room, reviewing something on his tablet. The machine continued to hum. Jake found himself staring at a poster on the wall about genetic privacy rights. It was written in 6 different languages. Suddenly, the machine made a different sound. A sharp, high-pitched beep that made both Jake and Dr. Vorin look up. The lights on the scanner were flashing red now, then gold, then a bright white that filled the room. Dr. Vorin's 4 eyes widened in sequence, from top to bottom, his face going pale. He rushed to the machine, his hands flying over the controls. "That's impossible," he whispered. "What? What's wrong?" Jake asked, sliding off the exam table. "The scanner, it's triggered something. Ancient protocols. I've never seen this before." Dr. Vorin's voice was shaking now. He backed away from the machine like it might explode. Before Jake could respond, the lights in the room flickered. Then went out completely. Emergency red lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in a crimson glow. An alarm began to wail somewhere in the distance. "What the hell is going on?" Jake demanded. Dr. Vorin was frantically typing on his tablet, but his hands were trembling so badly he kept missing the keys. The scanner accessed the Galactic Central Database. "It found something in your DNA. Something that shouldn't exist anymore." The air in front of Jake shimmered. It looked like heat waves rising from hot pavement, except they were forming a circle in the middle of the exam room. The shimmer grew brighter, more solid, until it became a glowing portal of blue and white light. Dr. Vorin dropped his tablet and ran for the door. It wouldn't open. He pounded on it, shouting in his native language. Armed figures stepped through the portal. 5 of them, moving with military precision. They wore armor that looked ancient but incredibly advanced at the same time. The metal was black and gold, etched with intricate patterns. On each chest plate was a symbol that made Jake's breath catch, a phoenix rising from flames. The figures surrounded Jake in seconds, weapons drawn but not pointed at him. They were human, Jake realized. All of them. Their faces were hard, scarred, augmented with technology he'd never seen before. The tallest one stepped forward and removed his helmet. He was maybe 40 years old, with gray streaking through his dark hair. His eyes were intense, and when he looked at Jake, there was something in his expression that Jake couldn't identify. Reverence? Fear? Hope? The man dropped to one knee. His armor clanked against the floor. The other four followed immediately, kneeling in perfect unison. Your Imperial Majesty, the man said, and his voice was shaking with emotion. My name is Commander Blake. I am captain of the Palatine Guard, sworn to protect the Phoenix Throne. He looked up at Jake, and there were tears in his eyes. We've been searching for you for 300 years. Jake stared at him. His brain felt like it had short-circuited. I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm a mechanic. I fix ships. Your blood carries the markers, Commander Blake said. The Imperial genetic sequence. You are the last living heir of the Terran Empire. The what? Jake looked at Dr. Vorin, who was pressed against the door, his four eyes huge with shock. The empire that ruled the galaxy 500 years ago, Blake continued. Before the fall. Before the compact rewrote history and scattered humanity across the stars. He stood up, his hand over his heart. You are the grandson of Emperor Alexander VII, descended through your mother's line. Your Majesty, it's time to come home. Jake's hands were still shaking as the transport shuttle docked with something massive. Through the viewport, he could see endless metal stretching in every direction. This wasn't just a ship. It was a floating city. Welcome to the Unbroken Dawn, Commander Blake said, standing beside him. She's been waiting a long time for her rightful commander. The airlock hissed open, and Jake stepped into a corridor that took his breath away. The walls were made of some dark metal that seemed to absorb light, but strips of gold ran along the edges, glowing softly. The ceiling stretched up at least 30 feet. Everything looked old but perfectly maintained, like a museum that still functioned. 2 rows of guards lined the hallway, all in that same black and gold armor. As Jake walked past, each one dropped to one knee and placed their fist over their heart. It made him incredibly uncomfortable. Can they stop doing that? Jake whispered to Blake. They've trained their entire lives for this moment, Blake replied. Their parents trained before them, and their grandparents before that. Asking them to stop would be like asking them to stop breathing. They walked for what felt like miles through the ship. Jake saw training rooms where soldiers practiced with weapons he didn't recognize. He passed observation decks showing the stars outside. They went through what looked like residential areas with apartments and common spaces. This ship had entire neighborhoods inside it. Finally, they reached a massive door covered in intricate carvings. Blake pressed his hand to a panel, and the door slid open to reveal a room that made Jake's jaw drop. It was some kind of command center mixed with a library. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing star charts and data streams. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with actual physical books. In the center was a large table made of dark wood, surrounded by chairs. Real wood, not synthetic. Jake hadn't seen real wood since he was a kid. Please, sit, Blake said, gesturing to the table. I know you have questions. That's putting it mildly, Jake said, but he sat down anyway. His legs felt weak. Blake pressed a button, and a hologram appeared above the table. It showed a map of the galaxy, but it looked different from any map Jake had seen before. Whole sections were marked in gold, with human writing labeling systems and sectors. 500 years ago, this was human territory, Blake began. The Terran Empire. We didn't conquer these worlds. Most of them invited us in. There was a war, you see. The Great Conflict. It had been raging for over 1,000 years between 3 major powers, the Vrelian Dominion, the Thrain Collective, and the Kasari clans. Billions were dying every year. Jake stared at the map. The Golden Territory covered almost a third of the galaxy. Humanity came late to space travel, Blake continued. We were young, naive even. But we had something the older races had lost, hope. The ability to see solutions instead of just problems. Emperor Alexander I offered to mediate the conflict. Everyone laughed at him. The hologram changed, showing massive fleets of ships battling each other. Planets burning. Space stations exploding. But Alexander was brilliant. He spent 20 years traveling between the 3 powers, talking, listening, finding common ground. He made promises and kept them. He shared human technology freely, medical advances, agricultural techniques, things that saved lives instead of taking them. Slowly, the fighting stopped. The 3 powers agreed to a treaty. So humans became peacekeepers. Jake asked. More than that. We became the glue that held the galaxy together. The empire grew not through conquest but through invitation. Worlds asked to join because they wanted stability, protection, and access to human innovation. We built jump gates connecting distant systems. We established trade routes. We created the first truly democratic galactic council where every species had a voice. Blake's expression grew dark. The hologram shifted to show human cities, beautiful and advanced, with towers reaching into the clouds and ships filling the skies. We weren't perfect. We made mistakes. But we tried to do right by everyone. And that made us enemies. Who? Jake asked, though he suspected he knew. The Compact. They called themselves the Alliance for Galactic Prosperity, but they were really just warlords, slave traders, and criminals who'd profited from the chaos of the Great Conflict. Weapons manufacturers who lost business when peace broke out. Pirates who couldn't operate with Empire patrols everywhere. Corporate cartels who hated regulations protecting workers' rights. The hologram showed a date, 2487. Then it showed fire. They struck on Empire Day, when the Imperial family gathered on Earth to celebrate the anniversary of the treaty. They used weapons we didn't know existed, dimensional bombs that tore through our shields like paper. The Imperial Palace was destroyed in seconds. Emperor Alexander VII, his wife, his children, his brothers and sisters, all gone in a flash of light. Jake felt sick. My family. Your family, Blake confirmed quietly. But some survived. Your great-grandmother Victoria was pregnant at the time. She'd stayed on a colony world because she was due to give birth any day. When news of the attack came, loyalists got her off-world and into hiding. She gave birth to your grandmother Catherine 3 days later. The hologram showed ships fleeing Earth as orbital bombardments lit up the planet below. Without the Imperial family, the Empire collapsed in hours. The Compact had spent years positioning themselves throughout our government and military. They activated sleeper agents, sabotaged defense systems, and spread false orders. By morning, Earth was a wasteland. Our fleet was scattered. Millions of humans were stranded on distant worlds with no way home. What happened to Earth? Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. Still there. Still alive, actually. The Compact quarantined it, declared it off-limits. They told the galaxy that humanity was just another young species that had briefly achieved spaceflight before falling back into barbarism. They rewrote the databases, altered the historical records, and hunted down anyone who remembered the truth. Jake stood up and walked to one of the windows. Outside, he could see other ships in formation around the unbroken dawn. Smaller vessels, but still impressive. My mother never told me any of this. Your mother probably didn't know, Blake said gently. Each generation that survived had to hide deeper, forget more, blend in better. By the time Emily was born, the Imperial line had been scattered across a dozen worlds. She grew up as a refugee on Station Kepler 442, working maintenance jobs, never knowing who she really was. Then how did you find me? Blake smiled for the first time. Your DNA. The Imperial family was genetically modified centuries ago, back when humanity first left Earth. Nothing dramatic, just markers that would allow them to interface with certain technologies. Access codes written into their genes. When you submitted that DNA sample for your paternity test, those markers lit up the galactic database like a flare. He pulled up another hologram, showing Jake's genetic structure. Certain sequences were highlighted in gold. These markers do more than identify you. They grant you access to every piece of Terran technology still hidden in this galaxy. Weapons platforms orbiting dead stars. Forge worlds that can manufacture anything from medicine to warships. Jump gates that can transport entire fleets across the galaxy instantly. All of it locked away, waiting for someone with Imperial blood to activate it. Jake turned back to face Blake. You want me to restart the Empire? We want you to take back what was stolen from humanity, Blake corrected. We've been searching for 300 years, keeping the dream alive, maintaining this ship and others like it. We preserved the history, trained new generations, and waited. Now you're here, and everything changes. I fix cargo haulers, Jake said flatly. I live in a 400-square-foot apartment. I was fighting a paternity suit this morning. I'm not Emperor material. Your great-great-great-great-grandfather was a farmer before he became Emperor Alexander I, Blake replied. Leadership isn't about where you start. It's about what you choose to do when the moment comes. Jake looked around the room at the guards, at the holographic displays, at the weight of 500 years of history pressing down on him. Part of him wanted to run back to his tiny apartment and pretend this was all a dream. But another part of him, a part he didn't know existed until today, was already asking the question that would change everything. If I said yes, Jake asked slowly, what would we do first? Commander Blake's smile widened. Would show the galaxy that humanity never forgot. And that we're coming home. The news hit the galactic networks like a supernova. Within 3 hours of Jake's DNA test triggering those ancient protocols, every government in known space knew about it. The last heir of the Terran Empire had been found. Humanity's lost prince was alive. On the Vrelian homeworld, High Chancellor Torvin watched the reports with growing dread. He sat in his crystalline office, surrounded by advisors who were all talking at once. The Vrelians controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes. They'd built their fortune over the past 5 centuries by monopolizing shipping lanes that had once been free under human administration. This changes everything, Torvin's military chief said, his scales rippling with anxiety. If even half the old Terran installations come online, our fleet becomes obsolete overnight. Torvin knew it was worse than that. The Terran Empire's technology had been generations ahead of everyone else. Human ships could cross the galaxy in days while it took everyone else weeks. Human weapons could disable entire fleets without firing a shot. And human forge worlds could manufacture enough equipment to supply 100 planets in a single day. All of that had been shut down, locked away, waiting for someone with the right genetic code to wake it up again. We need to act fast, Torvin said. Call an emergency session of the Compact Council. Tonight. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in government chambers on dozens of worlds. The Thrain Collective's overmind processed the information through millions of linked consciousnesses, calculating probabilities and outcomes. The result was clear. If humanity regained even a fraction of its former power, the current galactic order would collapse. The HFY War clans had a different reaction. Their eldest warriors remembered the stories their grandparents told about fighting alongside human legions during the Great Conflict. They remembered honor, discipline, and warriors who kept their word even when it cost them dearly. Some of the younger HFY wanted to immediately pledge support to this new human emperor. Our ancestors served the Phoenix throne with pride, said War Chief Drath, addressing his clan council. Perhaps it's time we remembered what real leadership looked like. But he was shouted down by the majority who feared change, who'd grown comfortable with the current system despite its corruption. Meanwhile, aboard the Unbroken Dawn, Jake was getting an education that made his head spin. Commander Blake had assigned him a team of historians, strategists, and technology experts. They took turns explaining the depth of what his ancestors had built. The Empire wasn't just about military strength, explained Dr. Lisa Park, one of the few human historians who'd kept the true records. She was maybe 60 years old, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Your great-great-great-great-grandfather understood something crucial. Diversity makes civilization stronger, not weaker. She pulled up holographic images of the old Galactic Council. Jake saw humans sitting alongside dozens of alien species, all engaged in debate. Every species had equal representation, regardless of size or military power. A small mining colony's vote counted the same as a major world's vote. It was the first true democracy the galaxy had ever seen. But didn't humans have more power? Jake asked. I mean, we had the best technology. We did, Dr. Park agreed. But we shared it freely. Medical technology that extended lifespans for everyone. Agricultural systems that ended famine. Educational programs that were free and accessible. The Empire's philosophy was simple: everyone rises together, or eventually, everyone falls together. Jake learned that his ancestors had abolished slavery across hundreds of worlds. They'd stopped 3 different genocides. They'd negotiated treaties between species that had been killing each other for centuries. The Terran Empire hadn't been perfect, but it had genuinely tried to make the galaxy a better place. That's why they killed us, Blake added grimly. We were bad for business, specifically, the business of exploitation, weapons dealing, and profiteering from suffering. Another advisor, a tactical officer named Lieutenant Hayes, showed Jake something that made his blood run cold. It was a list of names and organizations that had funded the coup 500 years ago. These corporations still exist today, Hayes explained. They're bigger now, more powerful. They sit on the Compact Council. They control entire sectors. And they all profited massively from the Empire's fall. Jake studied the list. Weapons manufacturers who'd seen their sales triple after humanity fell. Mining consortiums that had used slave labor once human regulations disappeared. Corporate cartels that had seized Terran colonies and strip-mined them for resources. They're terrified of you, Hayes continued. Because if you activate the old systems, their entire empire of lies comes crashing down. As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Blake's communicator buzzed urgently. He listened for a moment, his face going dark. "The Compact Council has just issued an ultimatum," he announced. "They're declaring you an imposter and a threat to galactic peace. They're demanding we surrender you within 24 hours, or they'll consider it an act of war." Jake felt his stomach drop. "They're going to attack us." "They're mobilizing fleets as we speak," Blake confirmed. 3 major powers are sending warships. They'll be here in less than a week." Dr. Park looked worried but not surprised. "They can't let you live. Your very existence threatens everything they've built on humanity's grave." Jake stood up and walked to the viewport. Out there, somewhere in that vast darkness, armies were preparing to kill him. Not because of anything he'd done, but because of who his ancestors were. "What about other humans?" he asked. "There are billions of us scattered across the galaxy. What happens to them when this compact fleet shows up?" Blake hesitated. "That's what worries me most. If this turns into a war, every human in compact space becomes a potential target. They might see us as the enemy's people." Jake turned back to face the room. "Then we can't let it become a war. We need to show the galaxy what's really happening here. We need to tell the truth." "They control the media networks," Lieutenant Hayes pointed out. "They'll spin this however they want." "Then we broadcast on every frequency available," Jake said, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. "We show them the historical records. We prove the Terran Empire existed. We let people decide for themselves who the real threat is." Dr. Park smiled. "That's exactly what Emperor Alexander would have done. Truth before force." But Blake looked troubled. "Your Majesty, there's something else you need to know. Your ancestors built safeguards into the Terran systems. Automated defense protocols that activate when Imperial blood returns." He pulled up a star chart showing dozens of points scattered across the galaxy, each marked with a golden symbol. "These are weapons platforms, each powerful enough to sterilize a planet. They've been dormant for 5 centuries, but your DNA signature has already started waking them up. Right now, they're in standby mode, waiting for orders." "Your orders?" Jake stared at the map. His hands started shaking again. "You're saying I have access to weapons that could destroy worlds?" "Your ancestors believed in peace," Blake said quietly. "But they also believed in deterrence. These weapons were meant to ensure that no one could ever hurt humanity the way they were hurt during the Great Conflict. They're your inheritance, whether you want them or not." The room fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Somewhere out there, fleets were gathering to kill him. Billions of humans were in danger because of who he was. And now he had access to weapons that could end civilizations. "Show me everything," Jake finally said. "Every file, every record, every contingency plan my ancestors left behind. If the Compact wants war, they need to understand what they are really threatening." Blake nodded slowly. "As you command, Your Majesty." "And stop calling me that," Jake added. "My name is Jake. I'm a mechanic who just found out his family was royalty. I'm not ready to be anyone's majesty yet." "Then what are you ready to be?" Dr. Park asked gently. Jake looked at the star chart again, at all those golden markers representing power he never asked for and responsibility that terrified him. "I'm ready to make sure my ancestors didn't die for nothing," he said. "And I'm ready to show the galaxy that humanity never forgot who we were. We were just waiting for the right moment to remind everyone else." Jake stood in front of the camera, wearing the same grease-stained work clothes he'd had on when this whole thing started. Commander Blake had offered him formal robes, fancy uniforms, all the trappings of royalty. Jake had refused. If he was going to address the galaxy, he'd do it as himself. "My name is Jake Mitchell," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves twisting his gut. 4 days ago, I was a mechanic on station Kepler 442. I fixed cargo haulers for a living. I had an apartment the size of a closet and I was dealing with a paternity lawsuit from my ex-girlfriend. The camera was broadcasting on every frequency the unbroken dawn could access. Billions of people across thousands of worlds would see this. Jake tried not to think about that. Then I took a DNA test, and I found out my family was murdered 500 years ago. Not just my family, an entire civilization. The Terran Empire. My ancestors ruled a third of this galaxy, not through conquest, but through cooperation. They ended wars. They freed slaves. They built a system where everyone had a voice, regardless of what species they were or how powerful their military was. He pulled up holographic images behind him, historical records salvaged from the Unbroken Dawn's archives. Pictures of the old Galactic Council. Videos of human and alien children playing together in schools that taught equality. Documents showing treaties and trade agreements that had brought prosperity to hundreds of worlds. This is what they don't want you to see, Jake continued. This is the history they erased. On the night of Empire Day, 2487, a group of warlords, criminals, and corporate cartels staged a coup. They murdered my family. They destroyed Earth's defenses. They scattered humanity across the stars and then told everyone we'd never been more than a minor species who got lucky with space travel. His voice grew harder. They lied. They've been lying for 5 centuries. And now they are threatening to kill me because I'm proof that their entire system is built on a massacre. Jake stepped closer to the camera. I'm not here to claim some throne. I didn't ask to be the last heir of anything. But I'm not going to let them bury the truth anymore. Millions of humans live as refugees, second-class citizens in a galaxy our ancestors helped build. We deserve answers. We deserve reparations. We deserve to know who we really are. He took a deep breath. And we deserve justice for what was done to us. Then Jake did something that would change everything. He held up his hand, palm facing the camera, and spoke a phrase in ancient Terran, words that Dr. Park had taught him hours earlier. Ignis Phoenix. Surge at Lukit. Rise, Phoenix. Wake and shine. His palm glowed with golden light as his genetic code transmitted across every Terran system still hidden in the galaxy. The broadcast cut to a split screen showing different sectors of space, different forgotten corners of the universe. On a dead moon orbiting a red giant, a massive weapons platform that had been dark for 500 years suddenly lit up, its power core humming back to life. In an asteroid field near the galactic core, a forge station the size of a small planet began to wake. Manufacturing bays that could produce anything from medical supplies to warships started their initialization sequences. Jump gates hidden in nebulas, camouflaged near black holes, buried in the gravitational shadows of gas giants, all of them flickered to life, their ancient technology responding to Jake's command. The galaxy watched in real time as 1,000 points of light appeared on the star charts. Terran installations that hadn't existed on any map for half a millennium were suddenly broadcasting their locations and status. These systems are now active, Jake said. They answer to me. Not because I'm an emperor, but because my DNA says I'm the last surviving member of the Imperial family. I don't want to use them. I don't want a war. But if the Compact tries to silence me, if they come after humans anywhere in this galaxy, these systems will defend us. He lowered his hand, the glow fading. I'm giving the Galactic Compact 72 hours to respond. I want a public acknowledgement of what happened 500 years ago. I want reparations for human refugees. And I want guaranteed representation in galactic governance. If they refuse, if they attack, then everyone will see exactly what humanity is capable of when we're pushed into a corner. The broadcast ended. Jake slumped into a chair, suddenly exhausted. That was perfect, Dr. Park said, beaming with pride. Blake wasn't smiling. We're getting reports from across the galaxy. The response is intense. The holographic displays around them lit up with incoming messages. Thousands of them, then millions. On human colonies throughout compact space, people were pouring into the streets. Some were celebrating, tears streaming down their faces as they finally learned the truth about their heritage. Others were demanding answers from their local governments, wanting to know why this history had been hidden. Jake watched footage from a mining colony where 300 human workers had walked off the job, refusing to continue until they received equal pay with alien workers. On a station near the Vrelian core worlds, humans were holding a peaceful protest outside the government offices, waving makeshift flags with the Phoenix symbol. It's spreading, Lieutenant Hayes reported. Every human population center is seeing demonstrations. They're not violent, but they're demanding change. More reports came in. Several smaller alien species who'd been oppressed under the current compact system were joining the protests. A HFY War clan had just declared their support for Jake, broadcasting an ancient oath of loyalty to the Phoenix throne that shocked their government. 2 Thrain colony worlds are petitioning to open diplomatic relations with us directly, another officer called out. They are bypassing the collective central government. Blake pulled up a tactical display. But the Compact's military response is massive. They're assembling the largest fleet anyone's seen in 2 centuries. 7 battle groups from different species, all converging on our position. Jake studied the display. Red markers showed enemy fleets moving through space, all heading toward the coordinates where the Unbroken Dawn was stationed. How long until they arrive? 48 hours, Blake said grimly. They're not waiting for your 72-hour deadline. They're coming now, while they still have numerical superiority. Do we run? Jake asked. We could. Use the jump gates to move somewhere else. But they'll keep hunting us, and eventually they'll find us. Jake thought about all those humans protesting in the streets, finally learning their true history. He thought about the smaller species seeing hope for the first time that the compact stranglehold might break. He thought about his mother, who died never knowing she was descended from emperors. Then we stand, he said quietly. We show them that humanity doesn't run anymore. Blake nodded slowly. We have 47 warships. Ancient, but functional. We're also getting offers of support from defector fleets, so far, 16 ships from various species who've declared for us. Against their 7 battle groups, that's still terrible odds. What about those installations I just activated? Jake asked. Dr. Park pulled up a different display. 30 weapons platforms are fully operational and within range. The forge stations need at least a week to begin production. The jump gates are functioning, but would need coordinates and time to use them effectively. So we have some advantages, Jake said. Some, Blake agreed. But Jake, I need you to understand what's about to happen. This fleet coming for us won't negotiate. They won't offer surrender. They're coming to erase you and everyone loyal to you. This will be a real battle, and people will die. Jake stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, his ancestors had built something beautiful, something worth dying for. And somewhere out there, an armada was coming to make sure it stayed dead. Then we'd better make sure their deaths mean something, Jake said. Send a message to all human populations and our allies. Tell them to stay peaceful, stay visible, and keep recording everything. Let the galaxy see who fires the first shot. He turned back to Blake. And prepare our ships for battle. If the compact wants war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. The compact fleet emerged from jump space like a swarm of angry hornets. 7 full battle groups, over 300 warships representing the combined military might of a dozen alien governments. Their hulls gleamed with fresh paint and new weapons systems. They'd brought everything they had. Admiral Krenth commanded the operation from his flagship, a massive Vrelian dreadnought bristling with missile batteries. He'd fought in dozens of campaigns over his 40-year career. This should have been simple. Crush one old human ship and its handful of escorts. Send a message to the rest of the galaxy that the compact's authority was absolute. But when his senses finished their scan, Krenth felt his confidence waver. The Unbroken Dawn floated in the center of a defensive formation that shouldn't have been possible. 4 to 7 Terran warships, their black and gold hulls reflecting starlight, arranged in a pattern that Krenth's tactical computer couldn't predict. Every angle was covered. Every approach blocked. Behind them were another 32 ships, defectors from various compact species who declared loyalty to the human heir. Kasari cruisers. Thrain scouts. Even a few Vrelian merchant vessels that had been retrofitted with weapons. And surrounding all of them were thousands of civilian ships. Freighters. Colony transports. Mining vessels. Personal yachts. Every human ship within 10 light-years had converged on this location, forming a wall of metal between the compact fleet and the Unbroken Dawn. They're using civilians as shields, Krenth's tactical officer said in disgust. No, Krenth corrected, studying the formation more carefully. The civilians are positioned behind the military vessels. They are witnesses, not shields. They want us to know the galaxy is watching. And it was. Jake had made sure of that. Every ship in his civilian fleet was broadcasting live footage. Billions of people across thousands of worlds were watching this confrontation in real time. Jake stood on the bridge of the Unbroken Dawn, his hands gripping the command rail to keep them from shaking. Commander Blake stood beside him, calm and ready. The bridge crew worked at their stations with practiced efficiency, but Jake could feel the tension in the air. They're powering up weapons, Lieutenant Hayes reported. Multiple targeting locks on our position. Jake opened a channel. His face appeared on every screen in the compact fleet, and on billions of view screens across the galaxy. Admiral Krenth, Jake said, his voice steady. I know you're just following orders. I know you've been told I'm a threat to galactic peace. But before you fire those weapons, I want you to know something about my ancestors. He gestured, and holographic images appeared beside him, historical footage from the Terran Empire's archives. The humans who built this ship, who created this empire, they didn't rule through fear. They ruled through cooperation. When they had the power to dominate, they chose to negotiate. When they could have conquered, they chose to liberate. They ended the great conflict not with weapons, but with patience and understanding. Jake's expression hardened. I'm giving you that same choice now. Turn your fleet around. Go back to the Compact Council and tell them I'm willing to negotiate. Tell them humanity wants peace, representation, and justice, not war. He paused, letting his words sink in. But if you attack, if you fire even one shot at my ships or these civilians, then I'll remind you why the galaxy once feared Terran military power. Not because we were cruel, but because we were so overwhelmingly effective that resistance was pointless. The channel closed. Jake waited, his heart pounding. On the Vrelian flagship, Admiral Krenth faced an impossible choice. His orders were clear: destroy the human heir and end this rebellion before it spread. But he was looking at sensor readings that terrified him. Sir, his tactical officer whispered, those Terran ships, their power signatures are off the charts. And we're detecting 30 weapons platforms in nearby space, all targeting us. Our computer estimates each platform has enough firepower to destroy a dozen of our ships. Krenth knew what he should do. He should follow orders. But he was also a career military officer who'd studied history, including the classified files about the Terran Empire that most civilians never saw. He made his decision. All ships, weapons hot. Target the unbroken dawn. Fire on my command. Admiral, one of his officers protested. Sir, the civilians are behind the military targets, Krenth snapped. We won't hit them if our aim is true. Prepare to fire. The compact fleet's weapons lit up like a constellation of deadly stars. On the unbroken dawn, alarms blared. They are firing. Hayes shouted. Defensive positions, Blake commanded. Do not return fire until I give the order. Jake watched the tactical display as hundreds of missiles and energy beams streaked toward his fleet. His mouth went dry. This was really happening. Then the Terran ships moved. It wasn't like any space battle Jake had ever seen in movies or simulations. The 4 to 7 warships didn't scatter or dodge. Instead, they shifted formation with impossible precision, creating overlapping defensive fields that caught every incoming weapon. Energy shields that shimmered like soap bubbles absorbed beam weapons. Point defense systems that moved faster than the eye could follow intercepted missiles, detonating them safely away from the ships. Not a single shot made it through. Their shields are. I've never seen anything like that, Hayes breathed. They're adapting to each weapon type in real time. Admiral Krenth watched in horror as his fleet's entire first volley accomplished nothing. All ships, continuous fire. Overwhelmed their defenses. The compact fleet unleashed everything. Wave after wave of weapons fire lit up the space between the two forces. It looked like a meteor storm made of pure destruction. The Terran ships didn't even slow down. They began moving forward, advancing through the barrage like it was a light rain. Their defensive systems were so far beyond current technology that the compact's weapons might as well have been thrown rocks. Blake, Jake said quietly. Show them. Commander Blake nodded. All ships, execute Protocol Phoenix. Disable, don't destroy. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. The Terran warships didn't fire explosive weapons. They didn't use missiles or torpedoes. Instead, they used technology that the galaxy had forgotten existed: targeted electromagnetic pulses, quantum disruption beams, and gravitational manipulation fields. Compact ships didn't explode. They simply stopped. Their power systems shut down cleanly. Their weapons went dead. Their engines cut out. One by one, 300 warships went dark, floating helplessly in space as Terran ships maneuvered around them with graceful precision. The entire battle lasted 17 minutes. Admiral Krenth sat in his darkened command chair, emergency lighting casting red shadows across his face. His mighty flagship was dead in the water, disabled by a single pulse from a Terran destroyer that was a third its size. Jake's face appeared on the emergency screen. Admiral Krenth, I'm ordering my ships to dock with yours. My medical teams will provide care for anyone injured. My engineers will help restore your life support systems. And my legal officers will document the condition of your crew so the galaxy knows we treated you with respect and dignity. Krenth said nothing. He was too shocked to respond. You followed your orders, Jake continued. I don't blame you for that. But I want you to take a message back to the Compact Council. Tell them this is what happens when they attack humanity. We don't kill. We don't destroy. We simply show you that resistance is pointless. Over the next few hours, Terran boarding parties secured every disabled compact ship. They brought medical supplies, food, and water. They treated injured crew members. They made sure life support was stable and that everyone was safe. Jake himself visited Admiral Krentha's flagship, walking through the corridors with just 2 guards. He found the Admiral on the bridge, still sitting in his command chair. "You could have killed us all," Krent said quietly. "I could have," Jake agreed. "My ancestors had weapons that could sterilize planets. But they chose not to use them. They believed every life had value, regardless of what species it belonged to. I'm trying to honor that belief." He held out his hand. "Go home, Admiral. Tell your leaders what you saw here. Tell them that humanity isn't asking for dominance. We're asking for equality. We're asking to be part of the conversation again." Krent stared at Jake's outstretched hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he took it. "I'll tell them," the Admiral said. "But I don't know if they'll listen." "Then we'll have this conversation again," Jake replied. "But next time, maybe we can have it without the weapons." Within a day, the compact fleet was released. Every ship was repaired enough to make the journey home. Every crew member was accounted for and unharmed. The prisoners even received full documentation of their treatment, certified by neutral observers from species not involved in the conflict. The galaxy watched it all. They saw overwhelming force used with perfect restraint. They saw enemies treated with dignity. They saw what humanity had been, and what it could be again. Jake stood on the observation deck of the Unbroken Dawn, watching the compact ships jump away. Commander Blake joined him. "You know this isn't over," Blake said. "I know," Jake replied. "But we changed the conversation. We showed them we're not the enemy. We showed them what's possible when you choose peace over destruction."